Okay, so think about a simple sequence of numbers. Let's say 2, 4, 6, 8.
Right.
You immediately see the pattern, right? I mean, even a school-age child knows. That's just the even numbers, one after the other.
The principle behind it is transparent. You have the key, so it's not just a list of numbers, it's a logical system.
Exactly. The system is what matters.
Mm.
But now, imagine I give you a much stranger sequence. Something like 4, 9, 16, 25.
Okay.
Now, if all you know is basic addition, that sequence looks like complete and utter randomness.
It's just noise. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
None at all. But the second you understand the principle of squaring numbers, it all clicks into place. The chaos becomes perfectly logical, perfectly predictable even.
And that right there is the perfect frame of mind for this deep dive. Welcome, everyone. The sources we're examining today present a body of incredibly complex, esoteric doctrine. It's a system of knowledge that, like that second sequence, seems completely indecipherable unless you possess a very specific key.
Our mission today is to do a full, sort of academic analysis of this doctrine. Our sources call it the spiritual time order. We're going to unpack the sophisticated, almost clinical methodology that a secretive group, they're called the Brotherhood in these texts, uses to identify individuals they call the sealed.
Or the predestined. And this is a really remarkable synthesis of ideas. It's blending ancient Kabbalistic beliefs, some very specific satanic doctrines, and then a really intricate interpretation of biblical history.
And they've woven it all together into a single formula. A formula they claim gives them almost scientific precision for predicting and, I guess, targeting key spiritual figures.
It all comes down to one core secret, one fundamental problem they believe they've solved. It revolves around two completely different ways of looking at time.
Right. First, there's our normal everyday time, the minutes, hours, days, what sources call terrestrial time, or chronos.
And then there's the second one, the hidden one. This esoteric metric known only to the highest initiates. This is the spiritual time unit, or kairos.
And if they can bridge that gap between our chronos and this divine kairos,
then they believe they can literally predict the movements of God.
Okay, let's dive right into that central claim, because the idea of a spiritual time unit known only to a select few, that sounds like the ultimate form of gatekeeping, doesn't it?
It does, and the sources are very direct about that. They use an analogy. They say it's like trying to teach a preschooler a quadratic equation.
Which is a pretty powerful analogy. It's not just that they won't teach you, it's that you can't understand it.
Exactly. It establishes this hierarchy of wisdom. The doctrine isn't just withholding secrets for the sake of it. It's arguing that you need a certain level of spiritual and intellectual maturity to even begin to process the complexity.
It would be useless, or maybe even dangerous, in the wrong hands.
Or in unprepared hands. So it's reserved for the high priests of this brotherhood, the sumo sacerdotes. They're the only ones considered capable of handling what they call the shavde tempo, the key of time.
So if they have this key, why is our normal time, our chronos, so useless for what they're trying to do?
Well, because our time is linear. It's just one event after another, based on the rotation of the earth. It's man's time. But the spiritual realm, where destiny is actually forged, that operates on this nonlinear spiritual time unit.
The kairos.
The kairos. The opportune moment, the divinely appointed time. And without the key of time, the succession of these major spiritual events, like the births of the great biblical figures, it looks totally random to us.
It's just noise, like the 4, 9, 16, 25 sequence.
Precisely. To us, it's an indecipherable cadence.
Can you give an example of what that looks like, that indecipherable cadence?
Of course. I mean, look at the timeline of the Old Testament, the births of the great patriarchs and prophets. Abraham, then Moses, then John the Baptist, centuries later.
There's no clear repeating pattern there in terms of years.
Not in Chronos, no. The gap between Abraham and Moses, for instance, it's something like 400 years of what looks like historical silence broken up by slavery. To us, 400 is just a big, meaningless number. It doesn't help you predict when the next major event is going to happen.
But with the key.
With the key, that 400-year period might be interpreted as, say, just 2 sequential units of spiritual time, a perfectly logical, perfectly timed interval before the next phase of the plan. For the Brotherhood, the key makes the rhythm of God's interventions decipherable.
And if it's decipherable,
It becomes predictable.
they can anticipate its repetition.
Exactly. They're not just looking at the past, they're mapping the underlying spiritual cycles. If the cadence is logical, it implies that this pattern can be repeated or at least anticipated throughout history.
But it can't be that simple, right?
Yeah.
History isn't just a repeating cycle.
No, and that's why the key is so complex. It has to account not just for the repeating cycles, but for the sudden, sharp, inexplicable changes, the jumps in the pattern, moments of radical change in the divine plan that you could never predict just by looking at the linear history.
So to an outsider, these gaps and jumps just look like more randomness. But for the high priests,
For them, the key turns that chaos into a logical timeline. It gives them accurate, fundamental predictions that allow them to monitor certain regions, certain territories over centuries.
which brings us to the big question. If this key is so powerful, where did they get it? Where do the sources say it comes from?
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The material ties it directly to the heart of the doctrine it opposes. It claims that Satan himself detains the key of this principle.
He detains it. That's a very specific word.
It is. It's not just that he knows it, he possesses it. And he has revealed it, allegedly, only to his highest-ranking adorers.
So this isn't just some mathematical formula they figured out. It's presented as a direct, exclusive revelation.
Yes. They treat this knowledge of Kairos as an absolute truth revealed by the adversary. It's the bedrock of their entire predictive system.
And they've actually written it down. This key is codified somewhere.
It is, but not in any way that's easy to access. The sources explicitly state that the key is hidden within two specific texts of high magic. First, the Livro dos Grimoires, which is cited as a major treatise of high magic for the private use of the Brotherhood.
And the second,
The Satanic Bible itself.
how do you hide something like that in a book?
If it's written down, surely someone could crack it, right? Is it like a gematria code, or...?
It's described as something far more complex. The sources insist the code is structured in an extremely hermetic, humanly indecipherable manner. So no, this is not a simple substitution cipher you can crack over a weekend.
It's knowledge locked behind layers of symbolism and complex numerical structures. Designed to resist any analysis by someone who lacks the prerequisite spiritual rank and intellectual framework, the ability to crack this code is the ultimate sign of elevation within the Brotherhood, is the difference between being able to read the sheet music and being able to actually conduct the symphony.
There's a paradox here, though, that I
Yeah.
want to understand. If this temporal key is a satanic doctrine, how can it accurately map out God's perfect time, the Kairos? Are they just piggybacking on a divine clock that they can only partially see?
That is a brilliant question. It really cuts to the core of this, and the doctrine implies that the rules of spiritual time are universal. The formula is the formula, regardless of who discovered it.
Okay.
And Satan, as a spiritual being who fell from the highest angelic ranks, is credited with possessing this deep, intricate understanding of these divine temporal laws.
Laws that he now uses against God's plan.
Precisely. So the key doesn't create the rhythm, it just allows the Brotherhood to read the score that God already composed, and that allows them to anticipate the movements of the predestined.
Which moves us from the abstract theory of the key to how they actually use it.
Right. We have to transition from the what to the how, because predicting the birth of a sealed individual, it's not about one single data point. It's a formula,
A formula involving three specific interlocking factors.
a triangulation. That's what turns a vague prediction into what the sources call a practically certain certainty.
So just knowing one piece of the puzzle, like, say, that a particular year is spiritually significant, that's useless on its own.
Completely useless. It's the complete formula that minimizes the margin of error and makes the prediction, and I'm quoting here, fantastic, indescribable.
So let's break down that formula. What's the first factor?
Factor one is rooted in the physical world, in the cosmos. It's about astrological and astronomical signs.
Okay, so we're talking about what? Planetary alignments? Eclipses?
Exactly that, but with a very important caveat. The sources place a heavy emphasis on the rarity requirement. The celestial event they use is never a common phenomenon.
Why not?
Because if it were, say, a regular transit of Venus, millions of people would be born under that sign. It would be meaningless as a way to identify one unique predestined soul.
It's not a fine enough filter?
Not at all. It has to be a rare event or, and this is often the case, a rare association of multiple phenomena happening at the same time. That's what isolates the moment. That rarity is the first essential lock in the formula.
But even a rare event, like a total solar eclipse, can be visible across a huge part of the globe, an entire hemisphere sometimes. So how do they get from somewhere in this hemisphere to a specific location?
This is where the stunning degree of precision they claim comes into play. This is the core of their memento is their spiritual mapping.
So how does it work?
The source gives the example of a total lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
Now, that eclipse might be visible across, say, the entire country of Brazil, maybe even all of South America.
Okay, there's still a huge area to monitor.
It is. But the high priests aren't just looking at where it's visible. They are analyzing the conditions for perfect visibility.
Perfect visibility. What does that mean for an eclipse? Is that even a real astronomical term?
It's their term, and it entails a deep analysis of atmospheric conditions, horizon visibility, elevation, time zones, all of it. They might determine that while the eclipse was visible across the continent, only in one single city. Let's use their example. São Paulo was the vision of that eclipse truly perfect.
Meaning what? It was at its highest point in the sky, no cloud cover.
All of that. Viewed at its zenith with perfect clarity, at a precise calculated time that aligns with their other keys. This extreme analysis of physical conditions acts like a spiritual laser pointer.
So instead of the event defining a whole continent as the target zone, the specific conditions for perfect observation cause the heavens to, in effect, point to São Paulo.
Precisely. Since modern astronomy can predict the best time and place to observe such an eclipse with incredible accuracy, the Brotherhood just translates that technical data into a spiritual prophecy.
And that's how they narrow it down from a country to a city, potentially even a specific neighborhood.
A specific quadrant, yes. And that is factor one, the merging of rare celestial mechanics with geographical precision.
So that gives them the where, now they need the when. Which brings us back to factor two.
Factor two, the key of time. This is the secret knowledge we talked about, revealed by the adversary. It's the key to understanding the cadence of the spiritual cycles.
So the astronomical sign gives them the place, the geographical hotspot. The temporal key has to provide the exact timing.
Exactly. The key determines the specific year, the crucial month, maybe even the critical hours within that month when the probability of a spiritual seal birth is at its absolute highest.
And that window of time has to align perfectly with the celestial sign from factor one.
And with the final filter, the numerological table, which is factor three, without this temporal lock, the celestial sign is just. It's a pointer that showed up at the wrong spiritual moment. It's useless.
It sounds like this incredible game of spiritual synchronization. Everything has to line up perfectly.
It is. And it brings us right back to that concept of kairos. The sources explain that God has a right time for everything, but these major events only happen when our human linear time, our chronos, finally aligns with God's divine opportune time, the kairos.
They're trying to find the seam between those two realities.
And they believe the key allows them to do that. They use that powerful biblical metaphor to explain the difference. For God, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day.
It's such a radical difference in perspective. Our timing just doesn't apply.
Not at all. So if this brotherhood can successfully decode the spiritual rhythm that dictates when 1,000 years equals one day, well, they can spiritually compress or stretch time. And that lets them isolate that one brief moment in our chronos that perfectly coincides with the necessary kairos for a sealed individual to be born.
Okay, so they have the location from the stars and the time from the key. What's the third and final piece?
Factor three is the final non-negotiable filter. This is the complex numerological table. It's the mechanism that confirms the convergence of space and time.
And the sources say this isn't just basic numerology, right?
No, not at all. It's described as an extremely complex table of probabilities. They emphasize it's far more intricate than the common numerology the Brotherhood might use for other lesser purposes, like reading a personality or a general destiny.
This is high-level stuff, reserved for the high priests again.
Exclusively. Because the degree of philosophical and mathematical understanding required to manipulate and interpret this table is apparently immense.
So they take the location data from factor one, the time window from factor two, they feed it all into this table, and what happens?
The calculation must yield a specific mandatory result. This is the final confirmation.
And what is that result?
The final calculation, after everything else has aligned, must point to the number 5 or 9.
5 or 9?
Yes. That convergence is the absolute confirmation marker. If the final number is anything else, a 3, a 7, a 12, the prediction is discarded. It doesn't matter how rare the eclipse was or how perfect the timing seemed. If it's not a 5 or a 9, it's a false positive.
Okay, now that is genuinely strange.
Yeah.
Because why 5 or 9? If you're tracking God's chosen individuals, you'd expect numbers that are, significant in Christianity.
Like 3 for the Trinity.
Or 7 for perfection, 12 for the tribes or apostles, something like that. 5 and 9, they feel so arbitrary.
They do. And that's the essential insight that unlocks the entire rest of the doctrine. The sources actually acknowledge this paradox directly. They state that the numbers 5 and 9 are of great importance in high magic and Satanism.
Ah, so the numbers themselves are a clue to the real purpose here.
A massive clue. The function of these numbers suggests that the whole process isn't just about tracking a child of God. It's about simultaneously identifying a subject that has such profound spiritual potential that it can be neutralized. And even more critically, spiritually reversed.
So the formula itself is designed to find duality. It's looking for a spiritual signature that's just intensely charged.
Exactly. Intensely charged, regardless of whether that charge is currently positive or negative. And understanding why those two numbers represent that duality, that flippable potential. That's the next critical step.
Okay, let's go there. Let's get into the core logic of this idea of spiritual polarity and reversal. It's the why behind the numbers 5 and 9.
It is. This is the heart of their theological interpretation. And the Brotherhood's core premise here is, well, it's startling. They believe that every child of God, every single sealed individual, is also fundamentally a potential child of the devil.
That is a radical idea.
It's the cornerstone of their whole strategy. The spiritual mapping isn't just about watching God's plan unfold from the sidelines. It's a clinical process to find candidates who have so much raw spiritual power that they can be, first, neutralized.
Meaning their spiritual resistance is lowered.
Right, and then with devastating effect, they can be reversed to serve the Brotherhood's own agenda.
The logic being, if God predestined someone to be a great force for good,
that same person, if you can flip their spiritual polarity, can become an equally great force for hell.
This concept of reversal it's pretty abstract. How do the sources explain it?
They use some really interesting analogies from science to make it more concrete. The first one is from physics about polarity.
Okay.
They draw a parallel where children of God are the positive pole and the devil's children are the negative pole. And they argue that in the physical world, you can manipulate the electrons or the charge of an element to change its polarity.
So the element itself, the person, remains the same. They still have all that power God gave them.
Exactly. The substance is the same, the inherent potential is the same, but its spiritual orientation, its direction, changes completely. It uses its power for the opposite goal.
And there's another more modern analogy they use, right, from biology.
Yes, from orthomolecular medicine, and it's a fantastic illustration. It's about free radicals.
Okay, I've heard of those.
So oxygen, in its normal state, is absolutely essential for life. It's the ultimate positive force for our bodies.
Right, we need it to live.
But when that same oxygen molecule gets structurally altered and turns negative, it becomes what we call a free radical. And that radical actively starts destroying the body's cells. It causes aging, disease, and eventually death.
It's the same element, oxygen, but its polarity has flipped from life-giving to destructive.
Perfectly put. The element's power is constant, but its effect is inverted. And the Brotherhood uses this exact language to explain how the seal of a person can be preserved but inverted. They don't want to destroy the sealed individual, they want to corrupt them, turn them into a powerful but destructive, spiritual free radical.
Let's bring this back to theology then. Why do they believe the sealed are so uniquely vulnerable to this? Why is the potential for malice always present, even in them?
Their justification goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. They argue that from the moment Adam and Eve gained the knowledge of both good and evil, malice began to reside intrinsically in every human heart.
Which is really just their interpretation of the Christian concept of the sinful nature of the flesh.
It is, and therefore they believe that good and evil co-inhabit every single human being, even those with the most pristine spiritual seal. That inherent vulnerability, that sinful nature, is the entry point for their reversal strategy. The sealed are susceptible to the Holy Spirit, yes, but also to the malice inherent in their own flesh.
Okay, that finally brings us back to the numbers, the numerical justification. How does this doctrine of cohabitation and potential reversal explain why the final calculation has to be 5 or 9?
This is the absolute pinnacle of their esoteric system. The sources reveal that their complex Kabbalistic formula is explicitly designed with 2 layers, 2 different numerical interpretations running at the same time.
2 lenses for looking at the same data.
Yes. When viewed one way through the formula for positive divine tracking, the calculations naturally correlate with numbers that mirror God's nature. specifically the numbers 3 and 7.
The very numbers we were expecting. The Trinity in perfection.
The very same. Those are the positive numbers that reflect the actual divine destiny of the sealed individual. But the Brotherhood isn't just interested in the positive reflection.
They're interested in the vulnerability, the potential to be reversed.
Absolutely. So they apply a different but equally complex Kabbalistic formula to that same data. This second formula acts as a numerical reversal cipher rooted in high magic. And through this second inverted lens, that very same 3 and that very same 7 are transformed
Into the 5 and the 9.
into the final predicted numbers, 5 and 9.
That's staggering. So they're not just picking random numbers, they're using a secret numerical filter to transform God's own destiny numbers into their operational numbers.
Yes, the 5 and 9 become the confirmation. They confirm that the individual has the extreme spiritual power associated with the 3 and the 7, but also the inherent structural vulnerability that the Brotherhood is looking for.
It's a numerical signature for someone who is either strongly positive or highly flippable.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's an incredibly sophisticated system designed to identify the highest spiritual potential, no matter which way that potential could be directed.
And when all three factors align, the celestial location, the temporal key, and this numerical result of 5 or 9 day, the sources say the precision is fantastic, indescribable.
The implication for the modern day is enormous. It suggests they believe they have the capability with modern data to pinpoint not just a city or a neighborhood, but potentially the very hospital where a child carrying this seal will be born. The sheer effort they put into this shows how seriously they take the threat these individuals pose.
So to really understand who they're targeting, we need to be very clear about the different spiritual classifications, the nomenclature, as the sources call it.
Absolutely. This is crucial for academic clarity because we're blending biblical terms with the Brotherhood's interpretations. We need to define 3 distinct, non-interchangeable categories of people.
Starting with the primary target.
Category 1, the sealed or the predestined. These are the individuals with an immutable predestination. They have a spiritual seal, and Selo is spiritual, that has been there since the womb.
And their calling is unique.
Very specific. It's a ministerial calling that's described as incomparable to that of a common believer. We're talking about figures on the level of Abraham, Moses, John the Baptist.
And they are the absolute focus of this intense tracking. They're the greatest threat, but also the greatest potential prize if they could be reversed.
That's the key. Their destiny is immutable. It cannot ultimately be thwarted. The source uses that metaphor of a diamond being polished by fire. Even when the enemy thinks they're winning, when the predestined is suffering, being persecuted, facing injustice, God is using those exact situations to forge a pure, strong character.
The suffering isn't a sign of failure. It's part of the process.
It's the refining fire. It guarantees the seal's eventual purpose will be fulfilled. Look at John the Baptist. His calling was singular. Prepare the way for the Lord. There was no free will option for him to decide to be a fisherman instead. His destiny was non-negotiable from the womb. That's the nature of the seal.
Okay, so that's the sealed. What's the second category?
Category 2 is the elected. Now, the Bible uses this term in a few different ways, but in this doctrine, the elected are those called to ministry who do not possess the spiritual seal.
And the fundamental difference is free will.
Precisely. Unlike the sealed, the elected retain their full free will regarding their calling. They can accept it, but they can also tragically reject it. They can apostatize. They can fail to fulfill their destiny because of moral failure or just a lack of perseverance.
Their destiny is conditional.
It's conditional on their continuous choice and character. The source using a great analogy for this, it's like God calls a holy assembly and proposes names for ministry, but the angels, or whoever's involved, effectively vote. It's an election, not a predestination.
Now the third category.
Category 3, the saved. These are the simple sheep of the flock, people from every tribe and nation whose focus is simply on salvation, not on some unique, history-altering ministry.
They're the foundation.
Yes, the bedrock of the whole spiritual structure. They serve as faithful supporting pillars for both the elected and the sealed. They are important, but their individual destinies are not the focus of the Brotherhood's intense predictive mapping.
Now, the sources mention women specifically, because the examples so far, Abraham, Moses, are all male. But they acknowledge that sealed women must have existed.
They do. And the prime example is obvious. Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was addressed as blessed among women. Her destiny for that unique role was clearly fixed.
The sources also mention Old Testament figures like Sarah and Raquel, What do their stories tell us about the seal?
They teach us that even with a seal, the timeline can be delayed for the purpose of character forging. Look at Jacob and Raquel. Jacob clearly had the seal, his destiny was certain, but his own character was. Well, it was deeply flawed at the beginning.
A lot of deceit and favoritism.
Exactly. His life was chaos until God molded him. The sources suggest that the complexities in his family, the breaches, might have allowed the enemy to get a glimpse of his seal before God intended. And that forced God to use all the ensuing struggles, the years of labor, the family conflict, as a necessary refining process. The seal is immutable, but the vessel still has to be prepared.
Okay, so now we get to the end game, the strategy. What happens when all the calculations finally converge and they think they've found one?
This is the mepamento spiritual in action. Once the formula points to a specific territory in a specific time window with a 5 or 9 result, the operation begins. The demons assigned to that quadrant are activated to monitor the circumstances of all births in that area.
It's a highly targeted surveillance operation.
Extremely. They're trying to isolate and observe. They're tracking how many children are born at the exact predicted time, under the correct celestial signs. And if they get lucky, as the source puts it, and only one child matches all 3 factors.
And they're practically certain they found one.
Practically certain, yes. And that justifies a special, sustained monitoring of that individual that could last for decades.
But there's a delay. Right. The seal isn't immediately visible to them at birth.
This is a critical limitation on the enemy's side, and it's crucial to God's counter-strategy. For reasons the sources don't explain, the seal only becomes visually confirmable to these entities in early childhood, usually between the ages of 5 and 7.
So before that, it's all just a mathematical probability.
Right. They're operating on their calculations. But once the seal is visually confirmed, the full specific strategy is mounted to neutralize that person.
And that strategy has 2 parts, reflecting that doctrine of polarity we talked about.
Yes. The first objective is standard spiritual warfare: weaken and neutralize. The primary goal is just to wear the person down, lower their spiritual resistance, make them ineffective before they can even begin their ministry.
But the second, more ambitious goal is recruitment.
It's reversal. If God predestined them to be a powerful force, the Brotherhood believes that power could be incredibly useful in their own ranks. The logic is chillingly efficient. If you are called to be great before God, you can be inverted to become great before hell.
And if recruitment fails, if the person starts to fulfill their original positive destiny,
then the final order is simple and absolute: destroy.
This whole systematic clinical pursuit, it forces us to look at the other side. What is God's counter strategy to all this?
According to the sources, God's preferred method is surprisingly simple. It's maximum stealth. It is hiding until kairos.
Concealment.
Yes, occultation. To hide the sealed individual until their precise moment of manifestation arrives. It's a divine act of keeping them completely under the spiritual radar of the Brotherhood's mapping technology.
And the historical examples of this are pretty amazing. They often involve hiding the person in the most unlikely place imaginable.
Look at Moses. The enemy knew a powerful deliverer was due. That's why Pharaoh ordered the murder of the male infants. But they didn't have the perfect location lock. And where was Moses hidden? In Egypt itself. In the very palace of his enemy.
The last place you'd ever look.
It's peak occultation. He spent the first 40 years of his life being raised by the daughter of the man who wanted him dead. The threat was real, but the mapping was incomplete.
What about someone like Elias? The prophet Elijah.
An even more profound example, we know almost nothing about his early life. He just appears. He shows up, seemingly out of nowhere, as this fully formed, powerful prophet challenging the prophets of Baal.
That sudden appearance strongly suggests divine concealment until the kairos was perfect.
It does, and the same applies to David. Before Samuel anointed him, who was he? The obscure younger brother, a simple shepherd. He was completely beneath the spiritual radar.
The enemy missed him.
Completely. He only lit up their map after the anointing and, of course, the very public confrontation with Goliath. And even after that, he spent years hiding on the run from Saul. Those years in the wilderness were essential for forging his character, but his early years were just pure, simple concealment.
So what happens when the concealment fails? When there's a pre-time discovery, like the sources say happened with Joseph, the son of Jacob?
In Joseph's case, the source suggests the enemy found a breach. The breach was family pride and arrogance, the hilardo, the boastful noise the family made around him.
Jacob's favoritism with the coat, Joseph's own prideful dreams.
All of it. That visibility, that arrogance, gave the demons the opening they needed to spot the seal prematurely, and once they detected him, they conspired against him, using the envy of his own brothers as their tool.
But here's the absolute heart of the irony in this whole doctrine, isn't it? The enemy's successful attack is immediately co-opted and used as God's necessary tool.
Precisely. The Brotherhood's agents, his brothers, intended to give the end to Joseph by selling him into slavery. But that systematic persecution was the very thing God used to break that vessel. Joseph was spiritually powerful, yes, but he was also initially arrogant, haughty. He would have been useless to God in that state.
So if the seals are discovered early, the enemy, the Diablo, is used as an instrument to deliver what the source calls a great favor.
A great favor to forge the character of the predestined, yes. These individuals, Joseph, David, Jacob, they were subjected to the angustias of hell, the intense suffering of isolation, persecution, injustice, prison, despair, all of it.
So that the pure diamond they were destined to be could finally be polished by fire.
Making them humble, strong, and finally fit for the immense service that was demanded of them. The enemy's greatest attempt to destroy the positive polarity becomes, paradoxically, the very refining fire necessary to activate that potential.
So we've really completed a full dissertation here on a doctrine of just astonishing complexity. A system that weaves together astronomy, these intricate numerical formulas where 3 and 7 become 5 and 9, and this secret understanding of spiritual time, all to predict and target key figures.
I think what stands out the most is that relentless precision and the underlying theological irony. The fact that the seal is immutable, that predestination is real, doesn't negate the absolute necessity of character refinement through extreme struggle.
And the enemy's entire strategy to destroy or reverse these individuals is consistently used by God as the very fire that guarantees their strength and prepares them for their moment, their kairos.
It's a profound twist. It suggests a spiritual economy where immense potential will always draw intense opposition. The sheer complexity of their formula, the need for this spiritual mapping, the goal of targeting a specific hospital, it all points to a deep, almost fearful respect for the power residing in that single predestined individual.
The logic is just chillingly efficient. You identify the greatest potential, the 3 and the 7, and you either neutralize it by reversing it, or you accidentally guarantee its strength by forging it in the fires of your own attack.
Either way, they believe they are influencing the outcome.
So, as a final thought for you to take away from this, consider the implications of that reversal doctrine, the idea of polarity. If the very elements that are essential for our physical life, like oxygen, can be turned into a destructive force like free radicals through a simple structural shift, does this suggest that the greatest potential for spiritual harm always resides within the strongest positive potential?
And conversely, what does the nature of intense suffering or protracted struggle in your own life reveal about your hidden potential? What forces might be attempting to either neutralize or perhaps forge that very destiny?
Something for you to mull over as you process the details of this deep dive.